The Zivar Dominion looked down on humans. To them, Earth was nothing more than a failed world, and humanity was nothing but a species of scavengers, picking through the ruins of their own mistakes. The war had left Earth broken. Cities were in ruins, space stations were abandoned, and whatever technology humanity had once been proud of was now scattered wreckage floating through the cold darkness of space. The Zivar had taken everything: resources, colonies, pride, and they had left only trash behind. But humans were not done. In the dark corners of space, hidden in the wreckage of forgotten battles, a small group of survivors worked in secret. Engineers, scientists, and soldiers, those who refused to surrender. Among them was Commander Rowe, a man who had lost everything in the war. He had no home to return to, no family left to mourn. But he had a plan. The Zivar had given them trash. Now, humanity would build something from it. The shipyard was hidden deep inside the remains of an old asteroid mining station. It had been abandoned for years, its systems barely functional, but the humans had repaired what they could. There, in the shadows, they worked on their project, a warship like no other. It had no name yet, only whispers of what it might become. Built from stolen Zivar technology and salvaged human parts, it was a Frankenstein of destruction, a ship that should not exist. The Zivar spies laughed when they first heard rumors of it. A human warship, made from junk. It was impossible. Humanity had no fleet, no power. The Zivar ruled space. But something was wrong. One day, a Zivar patrol ship disappeared near the asteroid belt. No distress call, no wreckage, just silence. Then another. The Zivar command dismissed it as malfunctions, accidents. After all, humans had no working ships left. But whispers spread among the lower ranks. Something was out there, something unseen, moving through the wreckage like a ghost. Rose stood on the bridge of the unfinished ship, watching as the final components were installed. The ship was unlike anything before. It had a strange, unnatural energy source, something recovered from deep inside a wrecked Zivar capital ship. Even the engineers didn't fully understand it, but it worked. And it made the ship different. It didn't just fly. It disappeared. The test run was simple. The lone Zivar scout ship passed by the asteroid belt. The ship's new systems activated, bending light, masking energy signatures. The scout ship never saw them. And then, in an instant, the human warship struck. A single precise shot. No alarms, no warnings. The Zivar ship was gone before it could even react. The Phantom, as some of the crew had started calling it, had claimed its first victim. Rowe watched the crew work, a grim smile on his face. This was only the beginning. The Zivar had given them scraps, thinking humans were finished. But from those scraps, they had built something deadly, something unstoppable. And soon, the Zivar would learn what it meant to fear the dark. The whispers had begun. The Zivar Dominion, confident in their control over human space, was starting to notice something unsettling. Their patrols were vanishing. Not in battle, not in some natural accident, but in complete, eerie silence. No distress signals, no wreckage, just gone. High Command dismissed it at first. Pirates, maybe. A navigational failure. But then it kept happening. And the rumors started. Whispers of a ghost in space, an unseen force moving through the wreckage of war, striking without warning. The Zivar were not a superstitious species, but even they felt something strange in the reports. Deep in the shadows of an abandoned asteroid belt, the ship responsible for these disappearances was preparing for its next move. The humans called it the Phantom. On its bridge, Commander Rowe stood with his arms crossed, watching the flickering data streams on the cracked old display screens. The Phantom was an abomination, a machine stitched together from the wreckage of lost battles. Zivar armor plating, human thrusters, scavenged stealth tech. Nothing about it should have worked. And yet it did. A deep hum ran through the ship, barely noticeable but always there. The experimental power core, taken from the ruins of a destroyed Zivar dreadnought, was unlike anything humanity had ever used before. Even the engineers didn't fully understand it. It gave the Phantom more than just speed or firepower. It made it invisible, a ghost in the dark. Ro's second in command, Lieutenant Sarah, approached him. She had been a top strategist before the war, before humanity had been crushed under the Zivar's rule. Like Ro, she had lost too much to ever consider surrender. "They're looking for us," she said, placing a datapad on the console. "The Zivar have sent 3 more patrol fleets into this sector, heavily armed. They know something is out here." Ro smirked, but there was no humor in it. Let them come. The Phantom was no match for a full Zivar fleet. Not yet. But that wasn't their strategy. Direct combat was suicide. Instead, they would bleed the enemy, strike and vanish, make them afraid. The latest patrol was moving through the debris field near Titan's graveyard, a massive region of wreckage left from one of the war's biggest battles. It was the perfect hunting ground. The Phantom drifted among the twisted metal husks of old warships, silent, waiting. Through the view screen, the Zivar patrol ships came into view, sleek, efficient, confident in their superiority. They moved in a tight formation, scanning the wreckage with high-powered sensors. They were looking for something solid, something that left a signature they could track. They didn't know they were already being watched. "Systems ready," Sarah reported. "Weapons locked. They still don't see us." Ro nodded. Timing was everything. The Phantom couldn't fight head-on, but it could strike like a ghost. And ghosts didn't fight fair. A single pulse of energy from the ship's core flickered through the wreckage. It was almost imperceptible, like a ripple in a vast ocean. But to the Zivar sensors, it was a false signal, a phantom distress beacon, mimicking the Zivar's own frequency. The lead patrol ship turned toward it immediately, breaking formation. That was the mistake. The Phantom struck like a shadow. Its weapons weren't like standard human weapons. They were hacked together from stolen Zivar technology, modified for precision. A silent burst of energy lanced through the lead patrol ship, disabling its engines in an instant. Panic. The other Zivar ships reacted, trying to regroup, trying to find their attacker. But the Phantom was already moving. A second ship's communication systems went dark, its distress call cut off before it could even begin. The Zivar fleet was blind. Ro watched as his crew executed the attack flawlessly. No wasted shots, no unnecessary risks. The Phantom was not a warship in the traditional sense. It was something far worse. It was a predator. Within minutes, the battle was over. 4 Zivar patrol ships, silenced, drifting helplessly in space. The Phantom left them there, floating wrecks among the ruined battlefield, a warning to anyone who found them. Back on the bridge, the crew worked quickly to erase any trace of their presence. No transmissions, no records, just silence. Sarah exhaled slowly. They won't ignore this. No, Ro agreed, staring at the fading wreckage. They won't. The Phantom disappeared once more, slipping into the shadows of space, leaving only fear behind. The Zivar Dominion could no longer ignore the whispers. Their ships were disappearing, and fear had begun to creep into the ranks of their officers. What had once been dismissed as malfunctions or pirate raids was now undeniable. Something was hunting them, something they could not see. In the grand war chambers of the Zivar High Command, a meeting was held. The room was dim, illuminated only by the eerie glow of holographic star maps. The faces of the commanders were cold, unreadable, but there was tension in the air. For the first time in decades, they felt uncertainty. Admiral Tyros, the one in charge of the human sector, stood before the gathered leaders. His voice was steady, but his mandibles twitched, a clear sign of unease among his species. "We have lost 14 patrol ships in the last cycle. No distress signals, no survivors, no wreckage found," he said, tapping the console before him. The hologram flickered, showing the last known positions of the missing ships. The supreme strategist of the Zivar, an ancient and calculating figure, leaned forward, a malfunction in their systems. Tyros shook his head. Negative. The wreckage we have recovered shows precision strikes. Someone is disabling them before they can react. There was silence in the chamber. Zivar technology was superior. Their fleets were unmatched. The humans had nothing left. Their forces had been crushed. And yet something was taking their ships, one by one. The supreme strategist narrowed his dark eyes. Send a fleet, not a patrol. A full battle group. Whatever is out there, we will crush it. The decision was made. A fleet of 20 warships was dispatched to Titan's graveyard, the last known location of the missing patrols. It was no longer a search mission. It was an extermination. Far from the Zivar war chambers, hidden deep in the wreckage of the old battlefield, the Phantom waited. Commander Rowe watched the fleet approach on the display screens, his expression unreadable. He had expected a response, but not this quickly. The Zivar were moving faster than anticipated. They're bringing everything. Lieutenant Sarah said beside him, "This isn't just a patrol. This is a hunting party." Rowe exhaled slowly. "Then we'll give them something to fear." The crew moved with quiet efficiency. The Phantom was not built for open battle, but it did not need to be. It was a ghost, a whisper in the dark. And ghosts did not fight fair. The Zivar fleet entered Titan's graveyard in tight formation. The wreckage of ancient warships drifted around them, silent and forgotten. It was a graveyard, but it was also a battlefield. The Zivar ships deployed their scanners, sweeping through the debris field. Every energy signature, every floating scrap of metal was analyzed. They would not be caught off guard. But the Phantom did not wait to be found. The first attack came without warning. A Zivar frigate, patrolling the edge of the formation, flickered on the monitors, then vanished. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. On the bridge of the Zivar flagship, Admiral Tyros leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in frustration. What just happened? A panicked officer checked the readings. Energy spike detected. Short range burst. Then nothing. Tyros clenched his claws. It's here. Find it. The fleet shifted, moving into a defensive pattern. Weapons charged. Targeting systems scanned every inch of space, but there was nothing to see. Then another ship disappeared. And another. Panic spread through the Zivar ranks. The enemy was not fighting them. The enemy was hunting them. Inside the Phantom, Rowe watched as the chaos unfolded. His crew moved like ghosts, executing precise strikes. Every attack was designed to disrupt, to instill fear. They didn't need to destroy the fleet. They only needed to break its mind. Zivar ships began firing wildly into the wreckage, desperate to hit something, anything. But the Phantom was already gone, slipping through the graveyard like a shadow. On the Zivar flagship, Admiral Tyros saw the cracks forming in his fleet. His soldiers were trained for war, but this was not war. This was something else, something unnatural. A cold realization crept into his mind. They had always believed humans were weak, broken, defeated, but this was something terrifying. Tyros turned to his officers. "We are leaving. Now." The command was given. The Zivar fleet disengaged, retreating back toward safer space. They had come to hunt ghosts, but the ghosts had hunted them instead. As the Phantom watched the last of the Zivar ships flee, a quiet satisfaction settled over the crew. The war was not over. Not yet, but for the first time in years, humanity had made the Zivar afraid. And fear was only the beginning. The Zivar Dominion had never retreated from a battlefield, not once in their long history. Their war doctrine was built on overwhelming power, absolute control, and the crushing of any resistance before it could become a threat. But now, a new variable had entered their calculations, something unseen, something that did not fight by the rules of war. It did not seek victory in open battle. It struck from the dark, erasing ships from existence without warning, without mercy. The whispers had turned into fear. Admiral Xyros sat in his war chamber, claws gripping the edge of his command table as he replayed the battle recordings from Titan's graveyard. The data was incomplete. No visuals of an enemy ship, no clear trajectory of attacks, only flickering energy distortions, unreadable telemetry, and the terrifying reality that 20 warships had engaged a single unknown enemy and barely escaped. This was not how the war was supposed to go. Xyros turned his gaze to the shadowed figure on the other side of the transmission screen. The supreme strategist had demanded an explanation, and Xyros had none to give. "You are telling me," the supreme strategist said, his voice slow and sharp like the blade of a knife, "that a single human vessel, a scavenged wreck, has forced the Dominion's finest war fleet to retreat in disgrace." Xyros fought the urge to bare his mandibles in frustration. "This is no ordinary vessel. It possesses stealth technology unlike anything we've encountered. Our scanners cannot detect it. Our weapons cannot lock onto it. Every move we make, it anticipates. Every tactic we deploy, it counters. It does not fight us. It hunts us." The supreme strategist remained silent, considering. Then he spoke with an unsettling calm. "Then we change the game. If we cannot fight a ghost, we burn the ground it walks on." Xyros stiffened. "You mean humanity still clings to its last hidden outposts? If this phantom is their weapon, they must be hiding somewhere. If we cannot find the ship, we will make them come to us." The transmission ended. Xyros exhaled slowly, then turned to his officers. "Begin preparations. We target every remaining human refuge. No survivors." Deep within the wreckage of forgotten war, the Phantom drifted in silence. Its crew gathered in the dimly lit war room, their faces tense as they studied intercepted Xivar transmissions. Lieutenant Sarah scrolled through the decrypted data, her expression growing darker with every line. "They know they can't stop us directly, so they're going after civilians. They're wiping out every last human outpost." Commander Rowe leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists. He had expected retaliation, but not this. The Xivar were not hunting the Phantom anymore. They were exterminating the last remnants of humanity. The room was silent for a moment. Then Sarah spoke again. "There's more. They've already attacked the Europa refuge." A chill ran through the room. Europa had been one of the last safe havens, a hidden colony deep beneath the ice, housing the survivors who could not fight. Scientists, engineers, families. Rose's voice was quiet, but heavy with rage. "Survivors." Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. "None." No one spoke. The war had taken much from them. But this was different. This was a slaughter. Engineer Duran, a man who had seen more wreckage and loss than most, finally broke the silence. "Then we stop them." Rose's eyes burned with determination. "We don't have the numbers for open war, but we have the one thing they can't fight." He turned to the crew, his voice steady and cold. "We make them afraid to take another step." The Phantom moved. Engines silent, systems masked. It slipped into the darkness, heading for the next Xivar target before the fleet could arrive. On board the Xivar battleship Dreadfang, Admiral Xyros oversaw the extermination fleet's approach to the next human outpost, a small mining colony on the edges of the belt. It would be nothing more than dust within the hour. "All ships, charge weapons," he commanded. "Wipe them from existence." The Xivar vessels formed into position, weapons primed. The humans below had no defenses, no warships to protect them. This was routine. This was how the Dominion crushed its enemies. But something was wrong. One by one, shipboard lights flickered. Consoles sparked. Targeting systems glitched, their weapon locks slipping. The Dreadfang's engines hummed with unstable energy as the ship's reactors flickered. A comms officer turned, his eyes wide with fear. "Sir, something's happening." Systems are failing across the fleet. Then the first ship vanished. No explosion, no impact, just gone. Panic spread through the fleet. Ships fired blindly into the void, trying to hit something they could not see. But it was useless. The Phantom moved between them like a ghost, disrupting systems, cutting power, turning their own targeting sensors against them. Inside the chaos, Ro's voice echoed through the Phantom's bridge. Make them remember what fear is. One by one, the Sci-Fi warships fell into silence. The fleet, which had come to burn humanity's last hope, was now the hunted. The Phantom did not kill them all. It left survivors, just enough to spread the message, just enough to let the Sci-Fi know. The ghosts of humanity were coming for them. The Sci-Fi Dominion prided itself on control. Every planet they ruled, every system they conquered, was a testament to their dominance. Fear was their weapon, their strategy, their very foundation. But now, the foundation was cracking. Word of the Phantom spread like wildfire through the Dominion's fleets. Whispers of ships disappearing into the void, of weapons failing without reason, of a force that did not fight for survival, but for revenge. Admiral Tyros knew this fear was poison. If left unchecked, it would rot the heart of the Dominion's war machine. So, they changed tactics. The Sci-Fi did not send more fleets into the dark to hunt the Phantom. That had failed. Instead, they tightened their grip on the systems they already controlled. They declared martial law across all human-occupied territories. Curfews, public executions, entire cities held hostage under the barrel of Sci-Fi cannons. The message was clear: surrender the Phantom, or humanity would suffer. Deep within a hollowed-out asteroid, in a hidden base known only to a handful of surviving rebels, the Phantom's crew gathered around a flickering holomap. It displayed a list of recent Sci-Fi atrocities, each one a brutal warning to the Resistance. Ro studied the data, his jaw clenched. "They've stopped chasing us," he murmured. "Now they're punishing anyone who might be helping us." Sarah folded her arms. "They're trying to force our hand, make us reveal ourselves." Joran, the engineer, leaned back against the cold metal wall. "Then what do we do? Keep hiding while they burn the last of us alive?" Ro looked up. His eyes burned with quiet fury. "No, we make them pay for every life they take." The crew exchanged glances. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Sarah tapped a command on the holomap, shifting the display to their next target. "We can't attack their fleets directly, but we can hit their supply lines. Their war machine runs on fuel, weapons, and fear. We take those away." Ro nodded. "We hit their command centers, their resource stations. We starve them of everything they need to hold their grip on humanity." Joran grinned. "Now that sounds like a plan." The Phantom's engines flared to life. It disappeared once more, slipping into the void like a shadow preparing to strike. The first attack came at the Sci-Fi's primary fuel refinery in the Epsilon system. It was heavily guarded, dozens of automated defense turrets, a squadron of warships, and an entire garrison stationed on the refinery itself. The Sci-Fi believed it was untouchable. They were wrong. The Phantom did not charge in guns blazing. It did not announce itself with a grand battle. Instead, it waited. It observed. It studied every patrol route, every shift change, every blind spot in the station's security. And then, at the perfect moment, it struck. A single EMP pulse, fired from deep within the asteroid belt, knocked out the refinery's external defenses in an instant. By the time the Sci-Fi warships realized something was wrong, the Phantom had already infiltrated the station. A team of operatives, trained survivors from humanity's last resistance cells, slipped aboard. They moved through the corridors like shadows, planting explosives, disabling key systems, hijacking communication channels. Then, when the Sci-Fi finally scrambled to react, the Phantom broadcast a single message across every Sci-Fi-controlled system. "For every human life you take, we will take your future." The refinery exploded in a chain reaction of fire and energy, reducing the Zivar's primary fuel supply to nothing but burning wreckage. It was not just an attack. It was a statement. Over the next few weeks, the Phantom struck again and again. Weapons depots went up in flames. Zivar data hubs were infiltrated, their secrets stolen and leaked to the remaining human colonies. Convoys carrying critical supplies vanished into the void. The Zivar were bleeding. Admiral Xyros felt the pressure mounting. Every battle he fought was against an enemy he could not see, could not predict. The supreme strategist demanded results. But how could he fight a force that did not play by the rules? Desperation turned to paranoia. Zivar officers began turning on one another, accusing each other of incompetence, of treason. Their fleets grew hesitant, afraid to leave safe zones. Their grip on their conquered territories weakened. And the Phantom? It only grew bolder. It was no longer just a ship. It was a legend, a whisper in the dark, a nightmare that refused to die. Humanity was no longer broken. Humanity was fighting back. The supreme strategist of the Zivar Dominion stood in the war chamber of the Grand Conclave, surrounded by high-ranking military officials and the cold glow of holographic battle maps. He had ruled over countless wars, orchestrated the destruction of entire civilizations, and crushed rebellions before they could rise. But now he faced an enemy unlike any before. A ghost. The Phantom had transformed from a single warship into something far more dangerous, a movement, a legend that ignited resistance across the stars. The Zivar war machine was bleeding resources, their fleets hesitating to leave their strongholds, their officers consumed by fear. The supreme strategist's mandibles twitched in frustration as he turned to Admiral Xyros. How many more resources must we waste before this ends? Xyros lowered his gaze. He had no answer. Every plan they devised had failed. Every trap they set had been avoided. The Phantom did not fight fair. It did not engage in battles. It hunted. It made the Zivar fear the darkness. The supreme strategist exhaled sharply. If they will not come to us, we will force them into the open. Xyros straightened. And how do you propose we do that? A cruel glint appeared in the supreme strategist's black eyes. We use bait. Deep in the void, the Phantom floated in silence, hidden within the wreckage of an ancient battlefield. Its crew sat around the war table, studying the latest intercepted transmissions. Lieutenant Sarah adjusted the holographic projection, zooming in on a Zivar-controlled sector. They've changed tactics. They're pulling back fleets from their outer territories, focusing their forces around key strongholds. Joran, their engineer, grunted. Makes sense. We've hit their supply lines so hard they can't afford to stretch themselves thin anymore. Rose studied the map with narrowed eyes. No, this isn't just a defensive move. This is bait. The crew turned to him. He pointed at a flashing red signal on the map. They're gathering human prisoners here. Not just resistance fighters, civilians, families, the last remnants of our people. And they're broadcasting it on an unsecured channel. Sarah's eyes widened. They want us to see this. Joran cursed under his breath. It's a damn trap. Ro nodded. Of course it is. They know we won't ignore it. They know we'll come. The room fell into silence. The Phantom had always fought in the shadows. Hit-and-run strikes, sabotage, psychological warfare. But this, a direct confrontation with Zivar forces in a sector they controlled. It was suicide. And yet, we have to go, Sarah said quietly. We can't let them die. Ro closed his eyes, considering the risks. Then he made his decision. We go, but not on their terms. The Phantom's engines hummed to life, and the ship vanished into the void once more. The prison facility loomed over the barren surface of an abandoned mining world, encased in layers of reinforced armor and protected by orbital defense platforms. The Zivar had turned it into a fortress, a perfect kill zone designed to lure the Phantom into a trap. Inside, thousands of human prisoners sat in cold, dimly lit cells, their fate uncertain. Some had fought in the last war. Others were simply survivors who had refused to bow. All of them knew the Zivar would not keep them alive for long. In the central control room, Admiral Xyros watched the monitors closely. His fleet remained hidden behind the planet's dark side, ready to strike the moment the Phantom arrived. "Come on," he muttered. "Take the bait." Minutes passed. Then an alert blared. "Incoming," a Zyvar officer shouted. "Unknown vessel approaching at high velocity. Wait, multiple signals." Xyros tensed. Multiple. On the screens, a dozen human ships appeared from hyperspace. Fractured remnants of old resistance fleets, barely functional warships, scavenged fighters. They charged toward the station, weapons firing wildly. Xyros bared his mandibles in triumph. "Fools. They think they can fight us head-on." He raised a clawed hand. "All batteries, fire. Wipe them out." The Zivar warships unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. One by one, the human ships were torn apart, explosions lighting up the void. Xyros watched with satisfaction until something felt wrong. His second-in-command turned toward him, confusion on his face. "Sir, why are there no distress signals? No emergency transmissions?" Xyros' blood ran cold. Then the lights flickered. Across the prison station, power systems failed. Security locks disengaged. The defense platforms fell silent. Xyros spun to the monitors, his voice a furious roar. "Where is the Phantom?" The answer came too late. Within the prison walls, hidden among the captured humans, Ro and his team struck. They had been inside the whole time. The attack fleet was nothing but a distraction, old derelict ships loaded with remote-controlled systems and explosives. The real strike had already begun. Doors burst open. Guards fell before they could react. Human prisoners surged out of their cells, weapons scavenged from fallen Zivar soldiers. Panic spread through the Zivar ranks. The prison, designed as a trap, had become a battleground. And then, cutting through the chaos, the Phantom emerged from the darkness. It had slipped through the collapsing defenses, descending toward the prison's surface. Its weapons targeted key Zivar positions, striking with pinpoint accuracy. Not to destroy, but to break their grip. Xyros watched in horror as his carefully laid trap collapsed in mere minutes. His forces were overwhelmed, his control shattered. Realizing defeat, he made a final desperate decision. He turned to his officers. "Activate the self-destruct sequence. If we cannot keep this station, then no one will." But before his command could be executed, a deep, cold voice echoed over the station speakers. "You are not in control anymore." Xyros froze. He knew that voice. It was Ro. The Phantom had already infiltrated the station's systems. Every lock, every command, every function now belonged to them. The prisoners were escaping. The Zivar were losing. And for the first time in his life, Admiral Xyros felt something unfamiliar. Dread. The Phantom had turned their own trap against them, and it was far from finished. The Zivar Dominion had spent centuries perfecting war. They had crushed empires, reduced civilizations to dust, and rewritten history to suit their rule. They were a species that did not know the taste of true fear. Until now. Until the Phantom. Until the moment their most powerful prison station, the heart of their dominion's control over humanity, fell into chaos. Admiral Xyros watched in stunned silence as the screens in front of him turned to static, one by one. His prison was burning. His forces were in full retreat. The prisoners were no longer captives but soldiers, and the Zivar guards had become the hunted. And worst of all, he could not escape. Every security override, every command he issued, every desperate attempt to regain control denied. The Phantom had seized the station systems, and with it, his fate. Ro's voice crackled through the speakers, calm and unwavering. "You never understood, Xyros. You thought we were weak. You thought you could break us. But you never realized Humans don't stay broken. We rebuild. And when we come back stronger. Zyros bared his mandibles in fury. You cannot win. You are nothing but a remnant, a dying species clinging to the past. Ro's response was ice cold. Then why are you the one begging for control? The Phantom strike had not just freed the prisoners, it had shattered the Zyvar's illusion of dominance. Every system, every fleet, every soldier in their empire would hear about this. The story would spread. And stories had power. The Zyvar had ruled with fear, but now it was they who feared the dark. In the depths of the prison station, battles rage. Human prisoners fought with the desperation of those who had nothing left to lose. The Zyvar, once so confident in their superiority, were falling. Sarah moved through the corridors, her rifle humming as she picked off Zyvar guards. She covered a group of civilians as they rushed toward the evacuation docks. Move. The ships are waiting. Joran was already at the control hub, rerouting power to open the docking bays. I've got the hangars online, but we need more time to launch. Ro's voice came through the comms. You've got 5 minutes before this place turns into a war zone again. Get them out now. Cyros refused to go down without a fight. He slammed his clawed fist on the console, activating his last contingency. If he could not hold the station, he would destroy it. The self-destruct system roared to life, the countdown flashing in harsh red symbols. 5 minutes until detonation. A cruel grin crossed Cyros' face. If I am to fall, you will all fall with me. But the Phantom's crew had anticipated this. Before Cyros could revel in his final victory, the self-destruct alarm suddenly cut out. The countdown froze. Then, the numbers reversed. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. And then, a new message appeared on the screen. This station does not belong to you anymore. Zyros felt his blood turn to ice. The Phantom's crew had seized even his last desperate act. The prison station would not be destroyed. It would be theirs. The last of the human prisoners boarded the stolen Zyvar transports. The Phantom hovered above the station, its dark hull almost blending into the void. As the final transport left the docking bay, Sarah gave Ro a sharp nod. Everyone's out. It's just us now. Ro turned to the station's control panel. Then let's send a message. He activated the station's long-range transmitter, broadcasting a single image to every Zyvar-controlled system. Not a battle, not destruction. A prison, once a symbol of their oppression, now under human control. A warship, once built from scrap, now untouchable. And a single phrase, burned into the Zyvar's nightmares forever. We are still here. The Phantom turned, its engines roaring as it vanished into the black. The war was not over. But for the first time, it was no longer a war of survival. It was a war humanity could win.